Hey everybody, welcome into this week's episode of Tony's Spot On Fishing. I'm your host, Tony Krizak, and today we're once again answering some viewer requests. We've been getting a lot of people asking about topwaters, be it frogs or Zara spooks, pop-bars, baits along those lines. And what we want to do is show you a little video about how you can come out here to these little ponds. We're in a little area subdivision pond here near our producer and editor's house. But these tactics and tips and tricks and all that we're going to show you today will help you hone your skills for you guys that are getting into tournaments, you guys that are going out fishing big bodies of water. These little ponds are areas where you can really hone your skills. They get super weed choked, good weed flats, topwater's the key. Now we've had some major storms here over this last week, especially just this past Wednesday here in Chicagoland. Major storms had come through, spawning even some funnel clouds throughout the areas. Weird weather changes, weird weather patterns. These little ponds in your subdivision, you may be struggling on some big bodies of water, but these little ponds can unlock some cool treasures for you. So we're going to show you all that this week. Topwater frogging on Tony's Spot On Fishing. Right in front, little guy. Wonder if that was the same one that was trying to swipe at it this whole time. Boy, that's a little guy, but he was fun. Come here. Right in the corner of the mouth. Well, there's one. Go ahead and get her back in. These hollow belly frogs that we're using, there's so many different ones on the market, but one that we've really been using that's been very effective has actually been from striking, the KVD frog. Now what separates this frog from a lot of the others, it's a little subtle thing that it has. It's just a little teeny rattle. Now being inside a hollow belly frog, it's not going to have a good clunk or anything like that, but it just makes that little bit of noise as it bounces inside itself. Just another little trick that you can do to help catch more fish on a bait like this. Well, I like the way that is coming about. One fish, one cast, or one cast, one fish, I should say. Now, you notice what I did. I'm throwing out and actually throwing to an opening. And we're going to let the ripples disperse a little bit. And the rod's going to do all the work on this bait. Even with a frog, just like if we were working a Zara spook or another topwater walk the dog style topwater, the reel is just there to pick up line. Now we can integrate some pauses. We come through this slop like this. We can pause it at certain points. Because you got to allow these fish some time to kind of maneuver their way through these thick flats like this. Now when you get into the thick stuff, you'll start to lose a little bit of the walk the dog action, but that's okay. We're still able to move fish. That first fish we got on that first cast there was right in front here on this thick stuff. And just as long as we're able to make some noise, we'll be able to get strikes. Now, we're going to throw this one out a little more in open water. And again, we're going to let the ripples just kind of subside a little bit here. Now you can see when it's out in that open water like that, I can actually get that bait walking side to side. So it's actually moving just like a Zara spook would. So if you're in a situation where you have thick vegetation just below the flats, and it's just a little too much for a Zara spook, it may not be breaking the surface of the water, but it could be just a little too much for those hanging treble hooks. We can still run a frog in this situation and be able to walk the dog with it. And with the KVD frog, that has that nice rattle to it, so it has a little more fish calling power and action than a lot of the other frogs on the market. Now let's talk about color as we're fishing here. Generally, if you talk to me a lot about topwaters, I talk about white, I talk about black on the bellies. Black will cause a bigger silhouette. White, of course, has that shad look to it. And I've done well with frogs. And white, black, and even just a natural frog type pattern where it's that yellow and green mixture to it with a little bit of gold and black. Even a little more natural to a frog. But those are the three main colors. Now when we're talking gear out here, we're not in thick pads, but we're still in thick cover, and we're gonna have to pull these fish out of it. We're running real heavy braided line, 50-pound braid, running our heavy action frogging rods and a good bait caster that'll have enough drag power that we can muscle these fish out if we need to. It's still combat fishing. Even though we're not in pads, even these thick mats like this, you gotta be able to get these fish out. Get hook sets at long distances on your casts and be able to control these fish. So let's talk about one other little thing we've done with this frog. You may have noticed when we were showing it off here just a moment ago, but in case you didn't, there's one thing we've done to this frog to alter it since we took it out of the packaging, and that was actually to trim the legs back a little bit. Now we take maybe an inch or two off. And the reason we do that is a lot of times with the real long legs, and don't get me wrong, there's been times where those longer legs are what you need to actually trigger strikes, but a lot of times we found you'll get short strikes, meaning they're gonna come and grab it further back here where these legs once were. Your hook, your business end of this bait, is right in there. So trimming these up a little bit will help kind of get these fish to key in a little bit more, especially when we're pausing that bait and these tails will actually come down these little legs like that. But all these hollow belly frogs, they got a little keel weight on the belly like that, so they'll always pretty much land in the water like so, belly down, and those hooks will be out and away from any of the cover. When those fish come up and grab it, what's nice, it's a good soft plastic, so it instantly just goes right down and those hook points are right there. And we can get the hooks right in that fish's mouth. So always trim your tails back a little bit before you start tossing the frog. So we're covering a lot of water. We're still in a run and gun situation, of course. You know, we really don't want to be sitting in one place too long. If we're not getting fish, ooh, little boil there. If we're not getting fish to go right off the bat or in any given spot, we can go ahead and make a move. Post-frontal conditions like this, especially with how bad things got, you can really attack fish one of two ways. We can run and gun and fish the mats, fish them with a frog like this, a walk the dog style frog, or we can choose to try to fish the outside edges with plastics, and you can go extremely finesse. Now, being that we're going in the evening, as the sun's getting lower, the topwater bite's gonna pick up, it's gonna get a little better. I prefer to look for those active fish. If we were finesse fishing, we'd be really fishing slow. And most of our viewers have been writing in asking about these topwater tactics, and especially on these ponds that get super weed choked like this. And we want to try to showcase exactly what we can do to get these fish to go. So even after these fronts, they're still active fish. There's still fish that live in these flats that, you know, even if it's not out of feeding, they'll actually still strike out of aggression. And in a lot of these ponds, they don't really have much access to deep water. We know from ice fishing this location that maximum depth is about 8 or 9 feet in the middle. Most of it's just one big shallow flat. So not every fish in this pond is going to go out and sit out over open water. And the best way to get these shallow fish on in this thick stuff is just working quick and looking for those active fish, getting your bites. Don't stay in one place too long. And the nice thing with the frog, we can just throw it anywhere. It doesn't matter if we're throwing it onto an actual carpet, if we're hitting open water first. This bait will really just come through just about anything for you. Now, one thing you may notice too, as I'm working these spots, I'll start on that outside edge and kind of work my way in. And once we have covered all the way from that outside edge all the way into the thick stuff right next to shore, because you'd be surprised in these small bodies of water how many bass will even just sit in 10 inches to a foot of water under the cover just waiting for something to swim by or come by. So I'll just slowly work my way in shallower and shallower. Now, I had a real small boil behind the frog on that outside edge. And I threw back on that edge again, didn't see her, so I'll work in. Now, before we move or start casting to another area, I'll go back and work it through that edge one more time. And being we're in a little bay, I can come down and fish this other shoreline. So I'll rest this area for just a second. And then I can come back and see if I can get that fish to eat one more time. You know, we made another little move here. Again, just fishing another corner. That's the one nice thing on these smaller bodies of water like this, and you're shore bound on the ponds, we can get in these corner situations where we can fish multiple weed edges and flats at the same time from the same spot. We've just got on here, we've had a couple fish just sucked the bait in, missed it. One probably just really just grabbed what little bit of the legs I have left on here. That other one swirled behind it. We've had a few now, these weak blowups. It's a lot to do with the weather, of course. You know, with this much change in the weather and the pressures and the amount of rain, thunder and lightning, everything, it definitely will affect it. And this is why, you know, I would much rather be in a run and gun type situation and find these active fish versus sitting here and really finessing it, taking our time. The downside with topwaters is, of course, the hookup ratio. Due to light refraction in the water and things of that nature, you know, fish do miss topwaters. They'll just swirl behind them and miss, or they'll bump it. They won't actually even have their mouth open. Maybe they'll grab a leg of this thing. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong when we're fishing a topwater. It happens. But there's nothing more fun than seeing fish come up and strike a topwater. Now, I've won a couple tournaments on topwater baits. Are they my first choice going into a tournament situation? No, because of that hookup ratio and the fact that fish can be lost on a topwater so easily, and you get poor hookups. But sometimes there's just no other option. Sometimes there's nothing else that'll get them going, like the fish calling power of a topwater. Now, we have not even attempted throwing a Cinco or a jig or a craw or swim jig, anything like that in this stuff. We're sticking with the topwater. There have been many days where I've gone and said, you know what? Textbook says we got to slow down, we got to fish finesse. I won't get a bite. There are times that there is just fish calling powers to a topwater. Now, it has to be used in the right conditions. We're getting ready, the sun's starting to set, lower light penetration into the water, thick weed flats like this. We can get away with running that frog. Now, if we were out here and we didn't have thick mats or anything like that, and it was noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, by no means should you be throwing a topwater. It's not going to work that well. But low light getting into evening and sunset, and even now, as that sun is starting to go down a little bit, a few more hits and misses, because we're not in super thick stuff. But as you can see, we're not going to be able to fish a spook through here, or a popar, or even a buzzbait for that matter. So we're definitely limited. Throw a Cinco, probably get it through. Again, fishing slow, we're trying to find active fish. Would a swim jig work in a situation like this? Yes and no. The weeds don't have a lot of solidity to them. They're still a little bit spongy and slimy. You're still going to get a lot of gunk on your bait. One of the other topwater baits that we talked about just recently was like, is there a spook type bait, walk the dog style bait. This one little section, I have a small clearing where I can pretty much shoot it down this weed edge, and let's see if we can get a fish to go on it. Now, is there a spook, of course, or any walk the dog style topwaters? They may have various different rattles to it. This is that Super Spook Junior. It's a little bit smaller profile, has that big BB to it, so you get that one knock rattle to it. Now, as you're familiar with on our Settlers Park show or even the Lake Patterson show, when we talk about Zero Spooks, we can do one of two things. We can tie direct right to a split ring, or we can use a snap swivel, or even just a cross-lock snap without the swivel. I don't really like doing that. The wire can thin out, weaken, you get breaks. It's better, in my opinion, to go with that split ring on the nose, put a little split ring on, and tie direct to that. What that does, it gives you a little bit more of a pivot point. You're gonna get that bait to swing and sway a little bit nicer. You get a little more head movement. Again, when we're working a spook, we're gonna twitch that rod tip down. In this way, we can also get a little bit of a head slap as that bait is going side to side. Now, when we're fishing a bait like this, because we're not going to be throwing it on the mats, the thick stuff, because of the treble hooks, we're going to run monofilament. The reason for that is there's a little bit of stretch to it. A lot of times these fish will come up, just try to suck that bait in. They may not come up and smash it. So it gives a little bit of stretch. We're able to actually possibly get that fish to suck it in, put a hook in them. Medium, I'm actually running a medium heavy rod, but this is a little bit lighter of a medium heavy. Most times, if this is actually a carbon fiber, so it's got a little softer tip to it again, just so it has that give to it that I can actually let that fish suck it in. But I like this rod for this setup when we're on weed edges like this, because if that fish turns and goes in towards the mat, I got the backbone to get them out. Monofilament line, high speed reel, just to help pick up that slack line. Again, same concept as with the frog. The reel is just there to pick up slack line. All the work of this bait is done in the rod itself. Same setup. We're going to actually let the ripples disperse a little bit. Then we can start to work it. Little twitches of the rod tip down. It's all in the wrist. We're not really moving our forearm. And just get that bait sliding side to side. Now, when we can throw a spook like this, especially a Super Spook Junior, it's got that one ball rattle to it. You're going to get a louder thump. Being a hard body bait, it's pushing a little more water, making a little more noise. Now, as we come up on this little clump, as you can see, any type of weeds really throws that bait off. So we have to be able to fish this thing around the clearings. We can't expect to throw this up on a mat and get this bait to work. There he is. Little guy, get him over that mat. Now, one thing you might have noticed there, that fish struck. Some might say, boy, Tony, you were a little slow on that hook set. No, I wasn't. Because with a topwater, you have to feel that fish. If you don't feel the strike, you're pulling that bait right out of that fish's mouth. So you have to wait until you actually feel them. Once you feel them, go ahead and set the hook on her. But there we go, Zero Spook on that outside edge. Just another little way we can get these fish to go after these big storms. Let's go ahead and get her back. There we go. Look at that. Now that one, how about that, folks? We were just letting that bait rest like I talked about. Let those ripples disperse. And as soon as I gave it that one twitch, she was there. Oh, she went right through that mat on me. But that's a little better one. Oh, get this gunk off you here, girl. So we can show the world what you look like. Whoops. Go. Grab my little pliers here. There we go. Now we had a little bit of a submerged weed flat. There's a little hump out there, and that fish was sitting on it. Nice big belly on her. She's been eating well. Let's go ahead and get her back in. We'll talk about what just happened here. Now, the reason why I always talk about pausing and letting that bait, let the ripples disperse, is because we don't really want to start working that thing right through the ripples. You cast, you make a little splash, trying to get that bait going. You won't get your cadence set right away. You're gonna have to kind of play around with it, let the ripples calm down, and then you can actually do it. So many times over the course of fishing, I've had that happen. You let the ripples disperse, that fish is looking at it, it's sitting there, you know you're thrown right on a good piece of structure, one twitch, it moved, she can't take it. So it's kind of two reasons why, really. But the main reason is just so that bait doesn't have to go through the wake or the ripples of your cast. But you can also see it can produce a fish too, which has happened on several occasions to me. That was a good case in point of what I was talking about. I got a little over anxious, and I actually set the hook when that fish came up. No fish. Never felt them, but it happens. You know, you get over anxious, you get excited, but you have to be patient. You have to feel that weight of that fish on the other end. Otherwise, that's what's going to happen every time. Now, one other thing too with these topwaters that we can't stress enough is throwing topwaters, again, in the right conditions. Now we're talking low light periods, sunrise, sunset, at night. And of course, if you get a nice cloudy overcast day, or if you're in really, really thick cover where there's not much light penetration, lily pads more than anything, and you can throw a frog even with the sun out there. Outside of that, I am not very high on topwaters under any other conditions but what I just mentioned. They can be very effective tools, search baits, and fish catching tools for that matter, when used under the right circumstances. That's one thing we really can't stress enough about topwaters. Well, everybody, that's about all the time we have for this week. My goodness, all these storms have sure made it tough around here. And of course, our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone affected by the storms that came through just this past week around Chicagoland. But we hope we gave you a little insight that, you know, even if you just want to get out after work for a couple hours, these neighborhood ponds, weed choked as they are, topwaters can be a great option for you. You know, fish are sluggish right now after everything, but we still cannot neglect the fish calling power that topwater baits have, and that's what we wanted to show today. Even under the most adverse conditions, when we can get everything to align with the right cover, the right cloud conditions, sky conditions, we can get fish to go on topwaters. There's no more fun way to fish, let me tell you. Hey everybody, be sure too to follow us on Facebook. Search us out, Spot On Fishing. We're on Facebook, that's our page. You can like us. You'll get all the info as far as where we're going next, pictures from other anglers that are reporting in from around the Chicagoland area with their catches. And of course, share all your pics. Are you fishing the water we're fishing? We'd love to see it. And it'll give you updates about all the places we're going. Of course, we're going back to Bussey Woods to do more on that mini-series throughout this year for you. More great shoots along the way from all over Chicagoland. We're just getting warmed up. So Facebook is the place to be to find out everything about us. And of course, if you haven't done so yet, be sure and subscribe to our YouTube page for us too, and you'll be given alerts to know when all the new episodes are launched of Tony's Spot On Fishing. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tony Krizek, and we'll see you next week.